All right, hello, good morning. Please feel free to come and fill in some of the empty spots in the front if you'd like a seat. All right, so at this time I'd love to invite my panelists to the stage, but the stairs are over here. I'm just standing on this side. My name is Amanda Zieda. I'm a reporter with Government CIO Media and the host of GovCast, which if you haven't heard it yet, it is our podcast on iTunes. All right, so directly to my right, we have Nick Sinai, venture partner at Insight Venture Partners and former deputy CTO of the U.S. Then next to Nick, we have Stephanie Neal, executive director of the USDS at DHS. Next to Stephanie is Marcy Jacobs, executive director of USDS at VA. And next to Marcy is Alex Romero, digital service expert at the U.S. Defense Digital Service. So before we start, I just wanted to give a quick congratulations to Marcy. Earlier this week, she won the Sammy's Award for the work that her and her team are doing at the VA.gov. All right. I had to put you on spot. Okay. So first, I want to start by asking each of our panelists what they're doing at their respective agencies at USDS. Stephanie, we'll start with you. You've been at USDS DHS for 2.5 years working on a number of projects, if you want to talk about those.
Sure. So as I think you all know, Homeland Security serves a variety of populations. So we, as the digital service, come in and partner on the program level to deliver services to some of those populations. We've actually been working with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services to modernize and digitize the immigration benefits process since 2014. When we first started working with them, they had about 10% online, and as of last fall, they now are up to 50% of the workload being available online, which is obviously improving efficiencies and just making processing benefits and delivering benefits more effective. Also within USCIS, we are working on a department priority to help reduce the backlog for asylum seekers. So as you guys know, or may know, it can take up to 4 years for an asylum seeker who arrives in the States today in order to get a decision. So we're working to reduce that from both an experience perspective as well as a security one. And last but not least, we are working with FEMA. Earlier this year, we partnered with the Grants Management Modernization Program to help them essentially modernize their 10-plus legacy systems into a single platform to deliver the $10 billion plus a year that it does to individuals and institutes to help recover and rebuild from disasters.
Marcy, you've been working on the brand consolidation of vets.gov and va.gov, right?
Yes. So VA has hundreds of different websites, probably about 5 or 6 that are the primary sites, vets.gov being one of those. And there are 10 million people who come to different VA online properties every month. It is a very disjointed and fractured experience. We built vets.gov to start pulling together plain language content, easy to use transactions, and make that a single front door so that veterans can easily understand and find out what they have earned, what they have access to. Right now, it's very much aligned by our administrations, which if you understand, you know how to navigate, but most people do not understand, and when they come to VA, they just want to come to VA. They don't want to understand that there's a benefit side and a health side and other sides. So what vets.gov has been doing is migrating some of that functionality onto a stable, modern cloud platform, working with users to make sure that we're building tools in a way that they can actually use those tools. Some of our tools were you had to downgrade your PDF viewer so that you could fill out a form. Who's going to do that? What we're doing now is sort of the next evolution of vets.gov, which is really putting the content where people are looking in the primary place that our users go, which we've learned through a lot of research with over 5,000 different veterans, service members, caregivers, VSOs, is they go to va.gov. So we're using va.gov as the platform and really putting that best content there. The other thing that my team has been working on is really building the internal tools to improve the experience for the people who receive that information once somebody hits submit. We have a team that's focused on building tools for attorneys and judges at the Board of Veterans Appeals and streamlining that process. It still takes a while, 5 to 10 years for your appeals to be processed, but we're improving that and we're building transparency so that at least we set a realistic expectation for veterans that it's not going to happen in 3 months, it's going to happen over a long period of time, and updating people as to what is the current status.
Yeah, go ahead. And when we talked earlier, you said you actually met USDS through the Hack the Pentagon pilot, right?
That's right, yeah. So I was actually the Chief Information Security Officer at the Defense Media Activity and ran a lot of the top sites for the DoD. And the Defense Digital Service came to us before in their formative stages as they were kind of standing up. And didn't know about them. They came to us asking to start a bounty against, defense.gov, which was the top site, or the flagship site for the DoD. Didn't know who those guys were, so I kind of asked for a letter from their boss initially. The boss ended up being the SecDef. So I got a letter from the SecDef saying basically shut up in color, so that's what I did. Years later, I actually joined forces with them, and we're trying to improve security, along with just improving services throughout the DoD for the service members and their families. So we've got a bunch of projects like Move.mil, try to facilitate folks as they're moving around the military. Code.mil to try to open source more of the code within the department. And also what I'm currently working on is the Hack the Pentagon program itself. As a technical SME, trying to figure out what are good options to test in a bounty crowdsourced security way. So we just finished with the Hack the Marines. We had a Medium post go live yesterday. But it was wildly successful. It was an on-site sort of assessment of a lot of Marine Corps assets. And during the event itself, it was the last day of DEF CON in Black Hat. We actually found all sorts of vulnerabilities, but the Marine Corps is pretty good at actually getting them patched. But I don't think they would have found a lot of those vulnerabilities had it not been for this crowdsourced security model. I don't want to take up too much of our time. Sorry.
That's perfect.
I can keep going.
Yeah, we'll get there. And Nick, USDS came out of the CTO shop. You've worked with USDSers, continue to work with them, and now you invest in cutting-edge cybersecurity companies. What's the intersection of digital transformation there?
Thanks for having me. Well, the U.S. Digital Services is fundamentally about understanding the user need, the citizen need, the immigrant need, the veteran need, the service member need, and helping build and buy the right services and deliver things that are simply intuitive and work across all channels, but with a focus on digital, right? And so part of that is buying modern commercial software. And so I'm pleased as part of Insight to be investing in those kinds of companies. But I actually wanted to pick up on something that Governor Ridge was talking about. He said, we need to have these $1-a-year employees. And what I'm not sure that he recognizes is we already have them, right? The U.S. Digital Service largely recruits from the private sector to come in for 6 months, a year, 2 years. The head of the U.S. Digital Service spent almost 20 years at Google. I didn't even realize that Google was 20 years old. But he led the web spam team. We had the security princess, Parissa, from Google come in and help. Matthew Weaver, he helped stand up the U.S. Digital Service. He helped respond to the OPM breach and, in fact, used Cylance as one of the commercial tools and others to help fix and recover from that breach. So there's a long history of bringing in great experts to work with really passionate public servants. And I think that's the other thing that gets lost sometimes is that the U.S. Digital Service would not be effective if they didn't have great champions and great public servants that they partner with every day that sometimes don't get to sit up on stage.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to ask a bit of a broader question now. Why are these solutions and tools needed right now in government? What are they driven by? Whoever would like to start, feel free.
So I think generally speaking, it's obviously the responsibility of the government to deliver these services in the most effective and efficient way that they can. But I think, obviously technology is simply a new tool that needs to be brought in to help realize these efficiencies and these gains. So, things like moving to the cloud can actually make these more secure, and, time to remediation is drastically reduced. So I think it's really just leveraging, new trends to support what, we as public servants have been trying to do for, for hundreds of years, deliver services to the people.
Software eats world, right? And so that's kind of an investment thesis of a number of investors. But software is also eating government, right? And so how do we build better software, and how do we buy better software that actually meets the needs and lets us deliver the services that we are promising as a government?
I think it's interesting when you hear about how much money the government spends on IT. I think it's $87 billion a year. It's some crazy amount of money. And the statistic that I heard was that 40% of that is never deployed because of whatever reason. There are so many small things that we can do to improve those metrics to make sure that we're actually getting the value. $87 billion, and do you all think that government IT is like the cutting edge, the best thing ever? We're spending a lot of money and we are not getting the value of that investment because we're going about it in ways that are not modern, that are not the private sector ways of developing software. And I think a lot of that comes down to thinking about technology, not from a technology first perspective, but from what is the outcome we're trying to achieve? What is the human behavior we are trying to change or we are trying to support? And how do we work from that outcome back to that investment? The way procurement is set up, the way, honestly, congressional funding is set up, we reinforce this dichotomy of we're going to throw money at problems and buy technology or throw solutions over the wall at a contractor and think that that's going to lead to a different outcome. I think what the digital service brings is a very different perspective and tries to show that by doing small things. Start small, show a win, learn something from it, and iterate.
Anything to add? Or?
Yeah, that pretty much covers it.
Awesome.
I think profit motives help private industry to actually iterate and get to a place. Whereas within government, it's a little bit different, right? You're just maybe, things move a little bit slower. So we have to bring those best ideas of how they do business, essentially.
And so I'm sure consumer expectations drive those capabilities a little bit.
Can I just add a point on technology? Technology is not a panacea, and I say that as someone, we have dozens and dozens of portfolio companies that are technology companies that deliver cutting-edge solutions, but it's not a panacea. It's also people and process and systems and all of those kinds of things with the user need as the North Star of like, what are we actually trying to do as an outcome? I think that we probably spend too much money on services and people rather than on technology. And when we do buy technology, we often don't buy the right technology. So there is an opportunity to say, hey, what is working in the commercial sector? And the commercial sector is not a panacea ever. Also, I mean, they make plenty of mistakes too. But see, hey, what is working at scale? And let's bring some of those best practices. And let's also bring those processes. So when we think about user-centered design or human-centered design is actually understanding what a veteran is trying to do and see it from their perspective. So it's not this forcing the veteran to navigate a large bureaucracy, but it's saying, hey, we're going to come to you and hide the complexity. We're going to do the hard work to hide the complexity and make it easy for you to get your benefits that you so deserve.
Yeah, that leads perfectly into my next question about human-centered design and product management. How are those methods used in the projects that you're deploying in your agencies?
So everything that we do starts with user research, and that can mean a lot of different things. If there is an existing tool that we are trying to improve upon, we do a lot of testing to understand what's working and what's not working. And research can be everything from one-on-one sessions, sitting next to a veteran, asking them questions, watching their behavior. It can be online, unmoderated surveys. We just released some surveys where we were testing language and making sure that navigation structures made sense to people. We've tested that with 1,700 people and iterated every round. We look at a ton of data to see what are people calling the help desk about? What are people confused about or really angry about that maybe we're not explaining in the right way? Apparently, updating your contact information is the second most called about thing across our over 1,000 call centers. Not kidding, over 1,000. And people call millions of times to update their contact information. What you don't know about the VA is previously, if you updated your contact information in one of the 87 databases that held your contact information, you uploaded your contact information in one of the 87 places, and that was it. Not a great experience. So people would call, people would be angry. We've been partnering with the Veteran Experience Office, who has built this platform called Vet 360, where they're trying to really pull together all of this data that lives in all these different silos across the agency, across all these different businesses, and everybody owns their data, which is not the right way that we need to be operating. And now if you update your contact information, which a veteran can do self-service without having to call somebody, on vets.gov, it propagates to all the other systems, which is so not revolutionary. It's so duh. But it's amazing. 40,000 people a day are updating their contact information and not having to call somebody. That's huge. That means that people are actually getting a letter saying when their hearing that they might have been waiting 5 years for, when their hearing is scheduled, as opposed to missing their hearing, which a third of people do. So it's little things like that. It's just listening to all the different channels and saying, what's really broken? What's a thing that we could fix? What's a pain point that we could have some impact on? We're not going to solve everything at once, but what's a step that we can take?
Well, real quick, you had teams from USCS sit with veterans at medical centers and watch how they used the site and the system, which I think is an amazing way to test how people are using it and take that feedback.
Yeah, we try to do a lot of in-person. It's very hard to kind of hijack someone while they're going into a doctor's appointment and say, can you just look at this for 10 minutes? But it typically is something where we need 10 minutes of people's time. And some of the testing that we do, it's really hard to recruit someone who already has a service connection and wants to submit a claim for an increase for a disability. That, like, the nuance is so complicated to test some of the tools that we're building. But we do a lot of partnering. There are a lot of veterans that actually work at the VA. So we do a lot of partnering internally as well to kind of tap into that market. That said, if anybody's interested in volunteering for user testing and is a veteran, please see me afterwards. But yeah, we try to do as much in person as we can, because then you can have the richness of the conversation to ask, why did you choose that, as opposed to just seeing a survey where you don't get that follow-up.
Stephanie?
Oh yeah, and I just want to call out that conducting user-centered design techniques and practices like user research and usability testing is really key to risk reduction. And I think that feels counterintuitive. A lot of programs, become focused on deadline, and they think, we want to get the software out as quickly as possible. And just adding in user research and usability testing throughout the process can just bloat the timeline. But what it leads to is producing higher quality products that will ultimately be viable in the marketplace, or for the users in the end, and that saves you a lot of time ultimately.
I totally want to just draw a line under that, because I think user research is still seen as this optional thing. If we have time, or if it's something new, it is the thing that helps you build the right solution. So if you aren't spending money and aren't investing in user research, you can be doing agile software delivery, you can be doing a modern process and building really quickly in the wrong direction.
So just stop and think about, what is government service delivery? There's software in it, whether you're delivering services to veterans or helping process immigrants, or a weapons system. There's fundamentally software in there. And what's the traditional way that we build software? Well, we write requirements for years, we do procurement for years, we build for years, and then in year 10, we say, here's some software. And the user, the operator, the beneficiary looks at it and is like, that wasn't what I needed. And so we've just, the technology may be more obsolete, the needs may have changed, the program may have shifted. And so I just want to +1 to this conversation about the way we traditionally do programs, and how software is actually part of the DNA of government. The other piece of this is, well, so who sits over all of that? Project managers, right? What is one of the disciplines that you have in government is project managers, who kind of oversee that big, let's write requirements and let's do procurement, right? And so forth. But what we really need is more of a discipline around product management. And that's why it's so cool to have folks like Stephanie, who that's her core discipline in the private sector, is product management, right? And thinking about these things from products. And you don't spend 10 years building a product in the private sector. I mean, don't want to speak for you, but you didn't,
No.
you didn't do it that way and then be like, aha, here you go, right?
We would be not only late to market, but obsolete, I'm sure, by the time we got out.
Yeah, so it's just this emerging discipline of product management, which is one of the hottest areas in business schools. I actually teach it in my class at the Harvard Kennedy School. I think product management is this discipline that we need to have more of in government, and that really encompasses and is related to these ideas of human-centered design and this user research and usability testing when we have prototypes and products, but also on the technical side, agile software development, so that we're have small teams that are building smaller pieces of software rather than kind of this big bang of software. And to tie it all back to the security conversation that we're having here today, that means how do you use modern stacks? How do you move in the cloud? How do you shift left with security and actually build secure code and test it, so you don't say, oh, we've been building for 2 years now, let's start running a bunch of tests to see how vulnerable this particular application is if you're building it internally.
And speaking of security, why is incentivizing bounties an important part in integrating security from the ground up in solutions in government, especially at DDS?
Yeah, so I think what we've learned with the bounties is that incentivizing researchers to come in and test our systems is really helpful. I mean, I was thinking about this last night. In the Wild West, you didn't just have bounty hunters going out for free to find the bad guys. They actually were incentivized by some sort of bounty on their head. In the same way, if we put money behind a bug that is found, that's brought to us, then I think we get some really good results. But there's also a disclosure policy part of this as well, where if you don't have a way to just get free assistance, a lot of times researchers are just willing to give you, some tips on maybe an open port that shouldn't be open or an application that has a bug in it. So we actually launched the vulnerability disclosure policy right after the first pilot for Hack the Pentagon. And since then, we've gotten over, I think, 7,500 or so vulnerabilities reported to us throughout the entire DoD sort of application, all the applications that are out there for DoD, which are substantial. It's a huge attack surface. So having the help from outside researchers has just been tremendous, because we've been able to identify, prioritize, put resources towards actually fixing the worst of those items. So.
Do you think that's something every agency should adopt, a
Yeah.
vulnerability disclosure policy?
Absolutely. If you can't receive free help, I heard this quote the other day, then I don't know, what else can you do? That should be the bare minimum, is the ability to actually receive free assistance from researchers. That, and being on the other side, I like to work with the hacker community quite a bit, and folks got to know me over time, and then they would just start reporting things to me because there was no other obvious way to report vulnerabilities. And so it really hit close to home when certain vulnerabilities were in my systems, but there was no legal sort of route that they could take because of CFA and DMCA. They just didn't feel comfortable reporting it and just sending an email or doing full disclosure sort of thing, or direct disclosure to me. So having a mechanism and a path for researchers to bring in information to us is incredibly important. So I recommend it to any agency that's out there. And we actually consult with other organizations if they want to start their own bounty or start their own disclosure policy. We have a lot of lessons learned, things that have worked, things that haven't. So.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure. Yeah.
I think that it's sometimes scary for agencies, because they're like, what do I do with this information? What if I don't have development dollars? What if we just don't look at it, and then maybe it won't be a problem? How do you handle that argument? Because there are a lot of agencies who are like, we don't want to put ourselves out there and say, tell us what's wrong. We'd rather just kind of stick our head in the sand and hope that nobody notices.
If a tree falls in the forest, does a vulnerability exist, right? This sound was made, there's a vulnerability. Whether or not you know about it and you see it is kind of, it's not important. It is there, so deal with it. And what's kind of interesting is for each one of these bounties, that has been a concern, absolutely. Well, we're not sure if we have the remediation monies to actually fix the issue, to mitigate it. But always there's been magical funds that appear. Just the cyber money and unicorn cyber money just appears to fix things most of the time, right? If it's bad enough and it's highlighted, it will eventually be fixed. So I think it's a good way to actually put some extra attention on those things that you are not sure about, or you think could be done better, or there are indications that it's been compromised already, which there's been a lot of that. So.
Is that a new congressional budget submission strategy for my program?
When a bounty gets some money, I don't know.
So I wanted to ask a quick closing question before we go to Q&A. We're running out of time a little bit. I want to know how you advise other agencies to adopt these digital solution best practices, especially when they don't have folks like you all on their team.
Sure, so I can start. I think this is probably pretty obvious, but I would say check out the Digital Service Playbook. It's online, and I know of a lot of programs that we don't personally work with that will refer to it and try to implement throughout their product development process. And actually, I believe you co-wrote that, right?
A little bit. There's a lot of authors, but yeah.
I'd say also check out U.S. Digital Service values. So we use our values to help us scale across all these different agencies, and ultimately they help help us to build better software by following things like create momentum, design with users, not for users, and the like. And I'd also say consider the fact, I think to Marcy's earlier point, it's not technology first, it's figure out the problem first. What is the problem you're actually trying to solve?
I would just say start small. Don't feel like you need to write every requirement for 2 years and then procure a solution for 2 years and then build a thing. Just start really small. Figure out what is the most broken part of the problem or what is something that is solvable, and build some momentum with that and learn from that and be iterative. I would also say don't wait till the end to do things like, is this usable? Is this secure? It has to be baked in the whole way through because you can't really do much to change it when you're at the end. So small, digestible bites.
Yeah. I was going to just say really quickly, just do it, right? So just empower yourself. And a lot of times you'll find that you have the support of leadership if they see that you're actually making positive change. As a young Marine, I found some issues in weapon systems that I was working on, and I brought it to my leadership. They didn't know what to do with it at the time, but I was empowered to actually attempt to fix it on my own if I could. But later on in my career, I just started taking that premise and applying it. If I could fix it, why not? Just try.
Yeah, we have fantastic public servants who, if empowered and also matched with the right kind of air cover and leadership, can do so much. And so to the folks who are inside agencies, I would echo all the comments here. To the leaders who attend, I would say give that kind of air cover to try these things, because you'll see they actually reduce risk and improve service delivery rather than kind of what you might be thinking. And then I'm also a big fan of people flow strategies, right? So you don't have to have a digital service team, but you can also think about how do you bring people in on short-term tours of duty or from other agencies or other disciplines.
Do we have time for Q&A? No. No time for Q&A. Well, thank you all so much. Sorry to take all the time with my questions. Thank you.